It's time for Herd Mentality, the weekly episode where you control the discussion today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of Go Bills and Buffalo's Run, also the co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome into Herd Mentality. Some great stuff to get into. The early parts of the conversation today will cover some running back storylines. Then we're going to get into some questions about Brandon Beane and bargain bin free agents and Sean McDermott's resume with safeties. And then towards the end, I want to talk a little bit about fantasy football and actually give you a family update. I had several people reach out and wanted a little update on how things are going at home as we are now 6 weeks into welcoming our second child. So I'll give you an update on that at the end. But let's get started here. First one comes from Chase. Chase says, given the state of the receiving corps, I'm sure most of Bills Mafia would welcome an increased receiving role from this running back room. That being said, I think it's fair to say that James Cook did not maximize his opportunities in the passing game in 2023. Given he had a 9.9% target share, he also had a drop rate of 9.3%. Also, I'm sure that most of Bills Mafia have nightmares over James Cook drops in both the Eagles game and the playoff game against the Chiefs. My question is, do you see any of the following occurring in 2024? Improvement from James Cook in the passing game and or increased passing game volume for the running backs, given the receiver core and or the addition of Ray Davis? Good question here, Chase. A lot to unpack. Let's first start with James Cook. And I fully recognize that James Cook had drop problems last year. In fact, if you do include the playoffs, his drop rate was 11.9%. That's way too high. But I'll also say this. I'm pretty surprised that it even happened. Pass catching was James Cook's thing coming out of college. There was not any concerns at all about route running or consistency catching the football. That was the strength of his game. In college, James Cook had one drop in 74 catchable targets for his career. That's a drop rate of 1.5%. So there's a big part of me that thinks this is a blip in the radar and that James Cook is not going to perpetually be a running back that has drop problems. They certainly piled up at the end of last season, and you felt them because they were in high leverage moments, touchdowns, right? A lot of them were touchdowns where it was not contested. You expect them to make the play. But this is the calling card for James Cook. It's that pass-catching ability. That's what made him such an appealing prospect. And so I feel pretty good about that getting cleaned up and not being an issue that continues throughout not just 2024, but his career. Ray Davis is a very good pass-catching back, the Bills' fourth-round pick out of Kentucky. The last 3 seasons in college, Ray Davis had 3 drops and 81 catchable targets. That's a drop rate of 3.7%. Also, Ty Johnson, a very capable pass-catching back. So you look at this collection of running backs, and you feel like their involvement in the passing game should be pretty regular. Of course, James Cook, your feature guy, but you're 3 deep on guys that are reliable pass catchers. Now, I think the biggest thing in terms of the volume of production being there for the Bills running backs is really Josh Allen's decision to throw him the ball. Josh Allen has kind of been reluctant throughout the past few years to really use those running backs. He wants to work the ball down the field. And so he says no a lot to open guys in the flats. And I kind of hope that he says yes to that a little bit more moving forward. In 2023, the Bills running backs and running backs alone compared to other running backs in the NFL had 71 catches. That was 21st in the NFL. They had 79 catches in 2022, 73 in 2021, and 56 in 2020. So despite having James Cook as the feature back, it was the second fewest amount of receptions the Bills running back room had collectively since 2020. And that's, of course, when the big ascension for the Bills offense really happened. And so I think you have a capable group of backs. I think that James Cook will shake those drops issues. And I think the X factor here is how big is the appetite of Josh Allen to dump them the football. And I hope that it increases, because I think that's an easy way for this offense to find more efficiency, stay on schedule, and hopefully get what it looks like sometimes as easy production. Just dump it down to a running back, make one guy miss, and get a chunk gain. I hope to see a lot more of that in 2024. Chris says, for herd mentality, I was wondering if you could discuss which running back is going to be used for pass protection. I worry that not having a vet like Latavius Murray will be an issue at some point. Maybe they'll sign one for that purpose. I think it's a good concern that you have here, Chris. And for as much as Latavius Murray's rushing production dipped in 2023 as the season moved along, the pass pro is still there. And a lot of very big plays in the passing game happened because Latavius Murray was able to get the job done in pass protection. I think the Bills are going to roster 3 running backs plus Reggie Gilliam. And I think barring injury, those running backs are James Cook, Ty Johnson, and Ray Davis. And I wouldn't label pass protection a strength for any of them. James Cook, through 2 seasons in the NFL, has been very poor in pass protection. I think Ty Johnson can be serviceable. And then Ray Davis, when you watch him in college, what I liked about his pass pro is his ability to process and diagnose and scan and get to the places where he needs to get to help the protection scheme. Where I took issue with Ray Davis in his college tape in pass protection was his blocking technique. He's kind of a guy that'll throw his shoulder and just try to make a little bit of contact. Well, in the NFL, you got to be able to leverage your hips, fit your hands, and stay square, right? There's a lot more technique involved. The good news is that he's got the mental side down, and he's got the frame that suggests he could be a good pass protector. Now we just got to get the technique cleaned up. And you know that this is a conversation for the coaching staff. This isn't just a unique conversation that we're having right now. They know this. They know that they need development from their backs in pass protection. They know that they don't have a great answer on the roster. And so that's got to be a big emphasis this offseason, is getting the technique and the mental side down for these guys to be able to go in and fill this void that's been left by the departure of Latavius Murray. And I don't think a move's coming here. Barring an injury, I think that's the 3 backs they'd like to go into Arizona with in week 1. I bet you that's the preferred trio. And so if somebody doesn't get hurt, I think this is your cast of characters. Next one here comes from Chris. Chris says, do you think it's more likely that next season the Bills have a player that goes for over 1,000 yards receiving, or have 6 players that go for over 650 yards receiving? Fascinating question. So do I think it's more likely the Bills in 2024 have a 1,000-yard receiver, or 6 players that go for over 650 yards receiving? It's a fun question that prompted me to do a lot of research. And so here's what I learned. In 2023, last year, only 6 teams last year had 3 players to have more than 650 yards receiving. And that's the most. That's the most in the NFL. The most amount of players that a team had to go north of 650 yards receiving, you had 3. And you had 6 teams have 3. And coincidentally, the Bills were one of them. They were close to having 4, but Khalil Shakir was like 30 yards short of meeting the mark. Then you had 17 teams with 2 players to collect 650 or more receiving yards. You had 8 teams have 1 player to have 650 or more receiving yards, and you had 1 team that had 0, and that was the New England Patriots. So 6 players to top 650 receiving yards would be kind of crazy. That'd be double the amount that any team had in 2023. Meanwhile, all but 8 teams had a 1,000-yard receiver. So 75% of the NFL had a 1,000-yard receiver. So I answer this question with conviction that it's far more likely that the Bills will have a 1,000-yard receiver than they will to have 6 players go over 650 yards receiving. And I think that player is Dalton Kincaid. I mean, if Dalton Kincaid gets the 120-plus targets that I anticipate him getting, put him down for 1,000 yards. And I think for as interesting as this Bills receiver core is, with the depth and maybe lacking like true premier players, and this idea that the Bills are going to share the ball, I think that's all true, but expecting that many players to have that much production seems rich. Now, I'd be curious to kind of look back at this at the end of the season, but I'm glad I did the research here and learned that the most any team had last year, top 650 receiving yards, was 3 different players. So I'm really fascinated to see what this target distribution looks like. I'll speculate over it a lot here in the weeks before the season, but I'm going to stop way short of thinking that many guys get that much production, because it just doesn't happen in the NFL. All right, folks, so we're going to talk about bargain bin free agents, Sean McDermott's resume with safeties, and a whole lot more on the other side of it, so be sure to stick with me. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the price, with the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available for U.S. customers. All right, folks, let's keep it moving. The next one comes from Andrew. Andrew says, we've signed a lot of potential high upside bargain bin free agents. Chase Claypool, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, KJ Hamler, etc. During the Beane era, which cheap free agent signings do you think outplayed their contracts and made meaningful contributions? All right, so I got a good list here for you. And I was hoping to have an even bigger list, but when I went to research this in advance of the podcast, Spot Rack was down, and so I couldn't look through the transaction history, so I had to very much go off the top of my head. And here's what I came up with. David Edwards. David Edwards was a league minimum signing last year, provided a lot of value as a depth player and a utility blocker as a big tight end. Now he's in line to be the Bills' starting left guard. Latavius Murray last year, minimum contract, productive early in the season as a rusher, productive consistently through the season in pass protection. Taylor Rapp played a high volume of snaps on a minimum type contract last year and is now likely to be one of your starting safeties. Ty Johnson last year, another great example of that. Darrell Williams. The Bills signed Darrell Williams to a 1-year league minimum type deal and winds up being a good starter for 2 seasons for this team. Quentin Spain. I know that the ending there wasn't very good, but the Bills signed him to a minimum deal, started all 16 games at left guard, and gave the Bills a very stable player there. Tyan Secchi was a league minimum type deal that was able to platoon with Cody Ford in 2019 and probably was a big reason why the Bills were able to get to the postseason that year. Kevin Johnson at cornerback, platooned with Levi Wallace, and they did a nice job opposite of Tre'Davious White for that season. Frank Gore, 2019, Devin Singletary's rookie season, thought he was a very meaningful addition. I know that he ran out of gas later in the season, but he was important early on. So those are off the top of my head, bargain bin free agents that I think the Bills got good value out of. And certainly you look at this year's crop and feel like there's a bunch of guys that could answer that, could fit this description once again. Next one comes from Jordan. Jordan says, I want to ask you about a theme I've heard repeatedly around the Bills media sphere. That is that the Bills coaching staff have magic sauce when it comes to the safety position. We are all familiar with what Hyde and Poyer became, but behind them, I'm struggling to see success in grooming talent to step in behind them. Neither Jaquan Jones or Damar Hamlin blossomed into starting caliber players, nor have they held on to any veteran backups to speak of until Taylor Rapp this past season. And the jury is still out there. So while the story with Poyer and Hyde is inarguable, I wonder if we give McDermott and company a little too much credit. All right, so Jordan, I'm definitely a big champion for this narrative. I've been talking about this for a long time because I think Sean McDermott's resume with safeties is absolutely incredible. And kind of your point here being that they haven't developed a player yet to succeed Hyde and Poyer. This is the first year that they're not here. So what opportunity has existed for that to happen? It's literally right now. And we'll see if Taylor Rapp can be that. But the safety position in Buffalo for the last 7 years has been Poyer and Hyde. And I think that's where you start the conversation. Yes, McDermott gets credit for Poyer and Hyde. Jordan Poyer on his third team signed a very small contract. Didn't really prove much in the NFL as a 7th-round pick. Winds up being an absolute star safety for 7 years in Buffalo. Micah Hyde, Green Bay Packers drafted him in the 5th round. Didn't even offer him a contract extension. Comes to Buffalo, becomes one of the best free safeties in the NFL. So yeah, those are big, feathers in the hat here for Sean McDermott. Go back to Carolina. Mike Mitchell. Mike Mitchell played in nine starts in 4 seasons for the Raiders. Comes to Carolina on a 1-year minimum deal, has a breakout season. Interceptions, sacks, forced fumbles left and right. He signs a 5-year deal with Pittsburgh after that breakout season. Keon Coleman played his best football with Sean McDermott in Carolina. Trey Boston as a mid-round draft pick, becoming a good starter for a number of years in the NFL. Go back to Philadelphia. Quentin Michael. It's a great example. Was a Pro Bowler for Philadelphia in 2009 under Sean McDermott. That's the only time that happened for him in his career. And he started 1 game in the first 4 seasons of his career before McDermott was the DC in 2009, and he becomes a Pro Bowler. So I don't know. I think there's countless examples here. I know that even like Brian Dawkins, when McDermott was part of the coaching staff in Philadelphia, he wasn't the DC, but that's a guy that he's coached. So I think the resume is absolutely incredible. And I don't really understand the argument of, well, they didn't develop Jaquan Jones or Damar Hamlin. Jaquan Jones is about as limited of a player as you could find, and he was a special teams guy as a 7th-round pick that got a deal coming out of his year and his time in Buffalo on a rookie deal. Damar Hamlin, filled in pretty admirably for Micah Hyde 2 years ago before the injury against Cincinnati. We all thought the Bills could win the Super Bowl that year. Were you thinking that Damar Hamlin was going to be prohibitive of that? I think his career has taken a major turn. We'll see what happens. But I just don't understand that as the foundation of the argument when you look at the broader sample size of what McDermott's done with safeties, and it's incredible. I put it up against any resume that's out there in terms of safety development. Not to mention a guy like Dean Marlowe. To mention a guy like Raphael Bush, who came in and had a good year under McDermott. I think the examples are all over the place. Andrew says, what would be your best case scenario projection for the Bills win-loss record to get into the playoffs, and worst case scenario to still make it? I think this always goes back to the same thing. 10 wins. If you win 10 games, that gives you a great chance to make the playoffs. If you go over the last 10 years in the AFC, every single 10-win team in the AFC has made the playoffs with 2 exceptions. The Dolphins in 2020, the Jets in 2015. Every other 10-win team over the last 10 years has made the playoffs. Meanwhile, we've also seen 6 9-win teams make it, including the Bills back in 2017. So 10, you're probably in. 9, you got a chance. 11, you're going. So win 11 games, win at least 10. I think that's kind of the strike zone that you're looking for to make the postseason. All right, folks, on the other side of it, we're going to talk about signing, draft picks, fantasy football, and the family update that I teased at the beginning, so be sure to stick with me. Today's podcast is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. Whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance, Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data that you need in one place. They are the #1 finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle, including breaking news, original editorial perspectives, analyst ratings, independent research, customizable charts, and so much more. You can securely link your brokerage accounts for a unified view of your wealth, including 401k and other investments. A comprehensive perspective is what sets apart great investors, and it's how Yahoo Finance ensures you have the insight to look at your wealth in its entirety. With a community of over 90 million users each month, their real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. The #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, folks, the next one today comes from Mike. Mike says, seems like other teams sign their rookies faster than Buffalo. Is it because we're just slower, or do we sign at the same speed and just hold off announcing? I assume there isn't much negotiation with the rookie pay scale. So the Bills typically sign their draft classes very, very quickly. That's not the case this year. It's a different circumstance. And that's because the Bills don't have cap space. They don't have it. They will have it in June when the Trey White money hits. They're going to get a little over $10 million in cap space. So that's why they can't do it, because they don't have cap space. Now, they did sign Travis Clayton, the last pick that the Bills made. Part of me is suspicious that, well, this is the rugby player, didn't have NIL money or stuff like that. So the Bills got that one done because they probably could fit it in. But the other 9 guys, the Bills don't have the cap space for. And so my prediction is that sometime in early June, you're going to see an announcement from the Buffalo Bills that says the 2024 draft class has been signed in its entirety. And all of the 9 players will sign. They'll announce it, and they'll get that done. It should count in totality about $2 million against the Bills' salary cap. And the reason that is true is because the rule of 51, the top 51 players count as your salary cap. And so while you're signing these players, even like Keon Coleman's going to have a very modest cap hit, the 51st player that's getting paid $1 million a year drops off, right? And so like maybe Keon Coleman's year 1 cap hit is $1.5 million. Well, it really only impacts the Bills' cap situation by about $500,000, and then that goes down by the players that they drafted later and later. So I think in total it's about $2 million against the cap, but the Bills don't have that right now. They'll get that in June. So the Bills aren't slow or anything like that. It's just the dynamics of the cap and when they're expected to get that cap space. Next one here comes from Topher. Topher says, with all your expert knowledge and nose for judging talent, the question has to be asked, how well do you do in fantasy football? All right, so I would say for a large part of my life, I did not like fantasy football. And what I've learned is that I don't like one-year redraft leagues. There's just too much luck baked into one season. You draft guys early, they get hurt, you're cooked, you're done. And I don't like that. So what I did learn is that I do like dynasty fantasy football, where you keep your team every year. And I'm in a really fun dynasty league. Nate Geary's actually the commissioner. There's a lot of Bills personalities in the league: Bruce Nolan, Greg Thompson, Dan Fates, Ryan Talbot, Del Reed, Joe DiBiase, Steve Mathis, Pat Moran, AJ Klybusky. And then actually Marcel Louis-Jacques is in that league as well. And I've really enjoyed that. We're entering year 5. I've been one of the better teams in the league. I actually won it in 2022. Bruce Nolan won it the first 2 years. Then I won it the next year, and I think Del Reed won it this past year. And I've enjoyed that a whole lot more than the 1 year redraft leagues. Also, I only do one fantasy football league. The people that have multiple fantasy football leagues, like some people have dozens of them, that's insane to me. One team, that's it. I'm not doing this thing where in one league I'm rooting for a player that I'm now playing against in another league. That's not for me. I'm not doing that. So one fantasy football team, this is it. And I really do enjoy the dynasty component of it. You know, we just did the draft where, you know, every year you have a draft for the rookies that go, you know, get picked. And then that also allows you to draft some of the free agents as well that aren't on teams. I really, really enjoy that because there's always something to be mindful of. Like, even if you're not a good team, you need to be paying attention to which players late in the season are getting opportunity and might be a thing the following year. And, you know, you got to be dialed into the rookies coming in and the opportunities that are going to be there for them. I like all that. I don't like drafting a team for one season and then my first round pick gets hurt for the year and now it's pointless. I'm not into that, especially because I don't believe in having more than one fantasy football team. My problem in fantasy, and why I don't think I'm a great fantasy player, I think I'm a good one, not a great one, is because I see these players too much through the lens of their potential and not the actual bottom line. Fantasy football is a bottom line situation. It's stats. And I think there are people that do a better job of being mindful of, okay, what is the normal production? For me, I look at it too much and I say, and I know that I do this and I haven't improved it. So there's that. I'd look at these players and I say, okay, this is their skill set. This is the offense that they're in. This is the team that they're playing. This should lead to this. And that's not always the case, right? That's not always the case because it really is bottom line. And so I got to do better of focusing in on the bottom line. For as excited as I can be about the potential of a guy, the reality is what matters. And I got to do a better job of that, I think, to be a better fantasy football player. But right now I got a quarterback problem. My quarterbacks are not working out. I got a pretty good rest of my roster, but my quarterbacks right now are Daniel Jones, Bo Nix, Will Levis. I also have Justin Fields and I have Drew Lock. And so it's a super flex, so you play two quarterbacks, and I don't have one good quarterback, let alone two. So that's what I got to get figured out. We're working on that. All right, the last thing I want to do here is give you a family update. And several people have reached out and said, hey, how are things going? We love when you've talked about your family on the podcast. Some people have said that was one of their favorite things that I do. And so I'm happy to do that for you right now. For those unacquainted, my wife and I just welcomed a baby girl 6 weeks ago. And then we have 2 kids now. So our oldest daughter is Rebecca Jean. She's 4. And now we have a 6-week-old baby who is Reese. So baby Reese, 6 weeks old, literally today. She's 6 weeks old. She's doing great. She sleeps well. She eats well. She's not too fussy. I find her to be reasonable, right? Like, I think you can look at some of these babies out there and, they're always fussy and they don't accept their current situation. I think baby Reese, very reasonable human being. I think she's got one problem, man. She spits up all the time. She's got to get that tightened up. We burp her. We know what to do here, but man, she just loves to spit up. I don't know that she loves to spit up. That's probably not fair, but she does a lot. That's probably the most frustrating thing about her in her 6 weeks of life in terms of the capacity that she has as a person. She's also going through that phase right now where she loses her hair and then she has the baby acne, right? So she's got to get through that. But she's cute nonetheless. And so she's doing great. We've absolutely enjoyed welcoming her into the picture. And like I said, she sleeps well and she eats well. And those are 2 huge boxes to check at this stage of life. Now, Rebecca Jean, 4 years old, and she's a happy, healthy little girl. She amazes me every day with what she says and does. I mean, there are just so many instances where she says something or does something where I'm just like, my jaw's on the ground. I look at my wife. We're like, what? How? Where did she learn this? She's just coming along well. She's involved in some activities. She does swim, she does dance, and she does gymnastics. And she does very, very well at all 3 of those things. We recently tried T-ball. That didn't go so good. I don't think a single kid on that team was enjoying the T-ball. I'll tell you, that's pretty chaotic. And I thought the coaching was pretty poor. And I appreciate those coaches. I never say it to their face, but they were very, very assuming. I mean, these are 4-year-olds. They don't know a thing about T-ball. And so they hit the ball and they're yelling them, run to first, run to first. These kids don't have a clue what first is, right? So I think they were a little too assuming with the kids, and it got very chaotic, and she just did not enjoy that at all. So we'll see what the future on that is. But she also wants to try soccer, so we're gonna give that a spin pretty soon. A lot of energy, very witty little girl, and she's incredible. We love her so much. But I will say the two kid deal is a different ball game. Different ball game. And you know that it's going to be a different ball game, but it's, you got to step into that arena and see for yourself. We're adjusting fairly well, I would say. The hardest part has been with Rebecca Jean, the 4-year-old. She's still learning to share her parents, and her attention-seeking efforts have really ramped up. So we got to work through that a little bit. But I'll say this, the baby in a vacuum is not hard. That stuff's easy. Feeding a baby, changing diapers, swaddling, that's not hard. It's that baked into everything else that you're doing that's tough. I will say we're really enjoying it. But there's no downtime. I'll say that. There's every second of the day is dealing with something, whether it's trying to get work done, dealing with Rebecca, dealing with Reese, trying to get stuff done around the house. It's a lot to layer together, but I really enjoy it. My wife really enjoys it as well. My favorite thing about being a parent is the teamwork opportunity that you get, that I get with my wife. And I love how we work together. We communicate extremely well. And I think there's just something about aligning with your best friend in the whole world, which is my wife, to work together on something that you care a ton about, raising kids, right? They've completely captured your heart. It's an incredible journey, and you get to do it with your best friend in the world. It's so cool. It's so cool. And I've said this before, but I love how being a parent has challenged me to be the best version of myself all the time, because the people around me in this house deserve that. And so I love how it changes my perspective and my attitude and my everything towards every decision that I make, because you realize that it's way bigger than just you. And I love that dynamic that exists in my life. So love being parents. It's going well. It's got its challenges. We're working through it. Well, I will say we're having a lot of fun, and it just feels like there's a lot of love in my house, and I just love that. I love being here with them, and the environment that my wife has helped me create with the kids here. So we're enjoying it, but we're absolutely still trying to figure it out. I'm not sure we ever will, but we'll have fun along the way. I promise you that. All right, folks, that's it for us here today on the podcast. I certainly hope that you enjoyed. I hope that you have a great Memorial Day weekend. As always, I kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills, and I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.